We can cross now to East Jerusalem and speak to Shaina Low, who is a communications advisor at the Norwegian Refugee Council. Thank you so much for joining us once again here on France 24. Could you just start by reminding us what role the Norwegian Refugee Council is currently playing with this conflict?
So we have 54 staff on the ground in Gaza. We've been operating in Gaza for the last 15 years. Unfortunately, because of the ongoing hostilities and because there is no safe place in Gaza, the vast majority of our operations have been suspended because it simply is unsafe for our staff to be out in the streets, and they need to be focusing on keeping themselves and their families as safe as possible and having their basic needs provided. We have, however, been able to do a couple of things to aid people in Gaza, which is one, distributing cash assistance to some of the most vulnerable families in Gaza. There's a very small window where we're still able to support people with cash assistance because supplies are not being replenished in stores. And so pretty soon money will not mean very much because people won't have anything to purchase with it. We also have been working in 2 schools, supporting them, 2 non-UNRWA schools, supporting the internally displaced people who are there, providing them with psychosocial support, other activities, and are working on getting food and non-food items distributed to them in the next couple of days.
Okay, stay with us, Shaina, because I just want to play a clip from the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, who's been speaking today. He's been calling once again for a ceasefire urgently in Gaza. He also said that Gaza was turning into a graveyard for children. Here's a clip of what he said.
Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children. Hundreds of girls and boys are reportedly being killed or injured every day. More journalists have reportedly been killed over a 4-week period than in any conflict in at least 3 decades. More United Nations aid workers have been killed than in any comparable period in the history of our organization.
The UN Secretary-General speaking there. I mean, Shaina, just listening to what he said, Antonio Guterres there, I mean, clearly there's no sign of that ceasefire that he and so many others are calling for. But does the rest of what he said tally with what your colleagues are telling you about the situation in Gaza?
Absolutely. It seems like every day when I'm talking to my colleagues on the ground, we're learning about other members of their families who are being killed in airstrikes, not only in northern Gaza, but also in central and southern Gaza. We ourselves at NRC, one of our colleagues lost her only child who was 7 years old in an airstrike in Rafah 2 weeks ago. There's an average of 1 child being killed every 10 minutes. Over 4,000 children have been killed in the last month in Gaza. It simply is not safe. We are desperate for a ceasefire, for a truce. There needs to be an end to this. Our colleagues are just exhausted. They do not know how they can continue on. They are tired. They are hungry. They are searching for basic necessities, waiting 5-6 hours in line for half a portion of bread to feed their families. 2 days ago, our colleagues told us that they had run out of water and were looking for water. They thankfully found some yesterday, but it was about half a liter per person, well beneath the recommended 50 to 100 liters per person that the WHO recommends each day. The situation is already catastrophic. We just don't know how much longer our colleagues and our friends and the 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza can continue. A ceasefire needs to be demanded by the international community, and it needs to be reached immediately.
I mean, there have been numerous demands, and it just seems they're falling on deaf ears. I mean, I just want to ask you about aid, though, because there is a lot of aid blocked at the border between Egypt and Gaza, or at least there was last week. Any sign of that backlog being slightly unleashed, and some of that aid that is waiting in trucks, it's been stuck at the border between Egypt and Gaza for a number of weeks now. Is any of it getting through?
You know, we had some hope last week when we had 102 trucks going on one day. That was the minimum. You know, the UN has been saying for weeks we need at least 100 aid trucks going in per day. But since then, there have been some days without any trucks going in, or only a couple dozen trucks going in. since October 21st, when the first trucks entered, there have been a little over 400 trucks that have entered, about 30 trucks per day. It's nowhere near what's needed to meet just basic humanitarian needs. The amount of aid needs to be greatly scaled up. But again, without a ceasefire, it becomes impossible to safely distribute that aid and reach people in need, not only in central and southern Gaza, but the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians remaining in northern Gaza and Gaza City who are also in desperate need of aid and assistance. So we need two things. We need to scale up the amount of aid going in, and we also need a ceasefire, or at the very least, a humanitarian pause so that of at least 72 hours so that aid can be distributed to all who are in need.
Okay, Shaina Low, Communication Advisor at the Norwegian Refugee Council. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us here on France 24.